Hi, everyone. It's really great to be here with you virtually for this Q&A with the wonderful Shane Koyczan. My name is Joyce Rosario. I am a performing arts curator and facilitator based in Vancouver. On behalf of the Chan Center team, thank you for tuning in. I want to begin by acknowledging that the Chan Center itself sits on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. Both myself and Shane and our audience today, all of you, are joining us from many places, and we also acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands. If any of you are watching along and have a question for Shane, please enter it into the live chat and we'll try to get to as many as we can. I'm so thrilled to introduce Shane Koyczan as our guest. Shane is a poet and a performance artist who currently calls Penticton home. His fiercely honest anti-bullying video to this day is shown in classrooms worldwide. His book, Stick Boy, was adapted for stage by Vancouver Opera, and his collaborations with the likes of Tanya Tagaq, Ani DeFranco, and David Suzuki keep him innovating and growing. Through his own publishing house, Stick Boy Press, Koyczan has released A Bruise on Light, a Guinness World Record holder for the most successful crowdfunding campaign for a book of poetry. 2 graphic novels, Silence is a Song I Know All the Words To, and Turn on a Light. A collection of poems called The Basement in My Attic, and a collaboration with Thetis Books called Inconvenient Skin, a journey into Canada's own troubled history with residential schools and the treatment of Indigenous people. His first new performance in a year premieres at the chancenters.com series tonight. Shane, it's super great to share a screen with you. Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Joyce. Hello, everyone that I can't see or hear.
It is the strangest thing, but here we go. It's kind of a beautiful opportunity to be in conversation with you. I kind of wanted to start at a bit of the beginning. I think we're both, would you consider yourself mid-career at this point-ish?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Same here. And I wanted to start from, I think a lot of people know or were introduced to your work through the Olympics, through Stick Boy, through TED Talks. But how I know you is from the late 90s, early aughts here in Vancouver, the spoken word scene, Café du Soleil on Commercial Drive, this beautiful hole in the wall on Granville Street called the Sugar Refinery. And, for me, when I think about spoken word and poetry, like it kind of formed me in my, late teens, early 20s. I'd love to hear kind of your recollections, memories, reflections of that time in Vancouver.
It's best of times, worst of times, right? During that time, I was, during a lot of that long stretch of that time, I was hand to mouth, an inch away from the street. But Vancouver was such an amazing place to be an artist at that time. There was a real sense of community and you belonged to something, and you got to be inspired by all the other artists that you were encountering and what they were doing and the works that they were creating. So it just became this sort of like machine that was self-sustaining in terms of, feeding that part of you that ignites your own inspiration. And so it was a really special thing to be a part of. And those venues you mentioned, like, have a lot of fond memories there. The Sugar Refinery, when I heard that place got shut down, it was just like, that kind of stake through the heart moment. And, we face it all the time now with like venues just being shut down one after the other. So, we were all kind of running for cover, looking for places where we could perform live to an audience, because there is that hunger there. People want that experience. People want that sort of intimate interaction. And Vancouver just had all these great sort of nooks and crannies, holes in the wall, Church of Pointless Hysteria, like all these great places where you could go. And yeah, okay, you might get your bag stolen or something, but it was, the energy to be part of it, to be part of that sort of creative force with everybody else coming up at the same time. And it was beautiful, but it was also very trying, very challenging to sort of make it work. Because during that time, a lot of what I was doing was, come do this gig for a couple drink tickets. That was kind of the way arts functioned at that time. And I think in a lot of cases, it's still kind of valued that way. It's like, come and bring people to, our venue and we'll give you a plate of food. And it's like, great, thank you, appreciate it. But it's also like, I'm putting massive amounts of work into this, as is every other artist who's, kind of on the same train. So amazing time to be around Vancouver, but also, yeah, challenging.
Mm-hmm. Such a different time. That the pre-post Olympics Vancouver, I think, is very markedly different. And all of the places that are no longer there, and the towers that just keep on being layered on these disappearing spaces. It's staggering. That time of I wanted to ask about your process of writing and performing, and how does one shape the other? Do you write things first, perform them, and kind of shift and change as you continue performing a work? How does that work for you?
No, well, not everything I write is fit for the stage.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of the writing that I do is journaling. So it's just kind of, my thoughts on paper. And I think people will probably see that a lot in this performance. In terms of performing, I don't know, I wasn't a big fan of the stage at first, but then what I realized, what it gave me was that, I'd been told all my life sort of, by bullies and other sorts of people, nothing you say has value or meaning. If you hear that stuff, often enough, you start to believe it, you start to internalize it. One thing that the stage really did for me was connect me with all these people, all these strangers who then were all of a sudden became more, we started to have a relationship. And so I think, like, for me, performing on stage gave me a way to, I think it's not an uncommon term, but it was kind of therapy, get those parts of yourself, get that energy out, get that, if it's anger, get that out. If it's sadness, get that out and leave it there on the stage. And you'll be surprised how many people come back to you and are like, yeah, hey, me too. And because one of the most terrifying aspects of, being afraid of that kind of thing is the sort of loneliness that comes with it. You feel like you're alone until you start talking and finding out, oh, there's all these other people who didn't have the exact same experience that I had, but have gone through something that is, alike. And, so you find camaraderie in that. And that's kind of what it just filled a need in me that I didn't have. I grew up very isolated. I grew up in Yellowknife, so it's very, very cold place. It's kind of reminiscent of now where we're all just kind of cloistered inside. Those were our winters in Yellowknife. You didn't go out to play.
I'm such a lover of live performance exactly for that, for the energy exchange that you witness, for the possibilities of transformation, whether that's the person who is performing or the person that is receiving. So many people connect with your work. So many people have been saved by your work. I'm so curious about what are the things that inspire you and that save you in terms of performance, say, or anything else for that matter.
I think those things have been lacking in a lot of our lives lately. I experience inspiration as an outside force. It's something that presses upon your life that then allows you to sort of internalize moments or whatnot and be creative. Right now, being cloistered away, here for a year and not having that, yeah, we've got Netflix and we've got, music and we've got all these other things, but there's something about being around each other that is really lacking. And it's put a huge dent in sort of my creative energy, where a lot of what I've been writing is very depressing. I've gotten off track and forgotten the question entirely. What was the question? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just trying to get at a bit of, what your inspirations are which you spoke to.
Arts,
Yeah.
art, like, whether it's two-dimensional, whether it's a painting on a wall or a sculpture or a dance or an opera or a concert or a poetry reading, those are the things that inspire me. And people get inspired by all kinds of things. Some people it's sports, some people, it's film. There's all different avenues for people to sort of, that's where they find their escape and things like that. I guess for me, that's where I find my engagement. That's where I find that sort of magnetism that draws me in and allows me to, ignite that creative engine. And I've just been missing it. And I think a lot of people have too. So.
You mentioned that you were doing workshops online. How has that been in terms of, like, you're trying to be inspired in this time, you're doing these workshops and helping others kind of ignite their inspiration for writing? How has that been working?
It was such an amazing break from the, this depression that I found myself in, where all of a sudden my world kind of lit up again and I got to interact with everybody. But yeah, again, in this sort of two-dimensional world that we now exist in. But it was that kinetic exchange of ideas and thoughts and opinions and things like that. So it was really lovely. And we had 4 classes and there were 30 students in each class, and I got them all to, over the course of I think it was a month, I got them to write a poem, and then we'd go back, we'd delve into it, and it's like what works, what doesn't, and sort of go through the process that I go through in creating something with, because nothing is ever the first edit. You go through it and you got to squish all your kittens and like, oh, I love that, but it doesn't work here and things like that. So it was a really rewarding experience. And I just put out an anthology of all the classes' poems. It's only for the students, but I just wanted to, give them back, like, here are the works that you all created, and look at what you all accomplished and did. And it was really incredible, because there were a whole range of, the demographic was so far reaching in terms, not just in terms of age and things like that, but in terms of, skill level. There were people that had come into it who'd never written a poem before. And then there were people that have been writing poems for years. So, and it was nice to see the interaction between all of them as well, and sort of, creating, hopefully some community there and maybe some mentorship with some of the other students in the class. So in that way, it was really great. But man, oh man, it was a lot of work.
Will you be doing more? I just think probably,
I hope so.
Listening, I'll be like, oh my gosh, I had no idea I could take a workshop with Shane. I want to take a workshop.
Yeah, no, I would love to do it. I think I would shrink the size of the class or space it out a bit more, because I have a newfound respect for teachers marking papers. Oh my God. It was just this really in-depth thing, because you don't want to just, you don't want to do a cursory glance. You really want to delve into their poem and like try to decipher, okay, what are they trying to say versus, what's being said here and what will work for them. And also just trying to be like, walking that line of like, be critical, but don't be cruel, be constructive in the advice that you're giving people. How do you help them grow? Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm going to jump to some audience questions. So there's a question here from Duncan, and Duncan asks, how do you experiment or change a piece to keep your own interest after presenting it repeatedly?
There's a number of different things. Like, I work with my band, Short Story Long. I love music is such an emotional lubricant for, that makes it sound super dirty, but it sort of sinks into those parts of ourselves that are a little bit more guarded. A lot of people, when their first experience with a poetry reading, they're being dragged to the show by another friend, and they're like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to listen to poetry. If you have something like music or something, it eases them into the idea of like, all right, here's something that I'm a bit more familiar with. But every show is a little bit different. Every show is like, you never know there's energy that happens in a live show, whether that's, oh my God, there's something going on in the audience tonight. I remember I was in Pittsburgh one time and there was a guy in the audience who had a heart attack. And it was this sort of weird thing of like, the show must go on, but let's stop for a couple minutes and like make sure everything's okay. There's just all kinds of things that come up. And so, yeah, like, I guess for
I
me,
want to
like,
ask, was he okay? Did he get to?
Oh, yes. He was
okay.
totally fine. Well, not totally fine. Oh my God. He was good. I checked in with him afterwards, but I guess to keep it interesting, a lot of my work comes from personal emotional spaces. And so every time I'm going back to read that poem, I kind of have to step into that moment of like, well, okay, well, why did I write this again? What part of my life, what space was I in during that time in my life when I wrote it? And it kind of reconnects you back to the poem. And so, but yeah, I try to change things up all the time. Sometimes I'll totally deconstruct a poem, and people will be really excited that they'll hear the start of a poem they really love, and then I'll just shift gears on them. So I don't know, you do all kinds of things.
Yeah. Duncan's the second part of his question was, does a piece ever lose its emotional impact?
I haven't really experienced that yet, but I give poems a chance to breathe. I give them a chance. Like, I mean, I'll do a certain set for like, okay, this is 6 months. I liken it, I guess, a lot to a comedian where every year they're having to write their new hour and things like that. I think the same is kind of true of spoken word, but there are pieces that, yeah, I want to go back and revisit, but I'll certainly give them their space to sort of let them rest for a bit. And there are poems that I've just outright retired because I don't want to go back there.
I know you've done recordings and different formats of your work, and what we're about to see is a little bit different, a pre-recorded live stream that was filmed in a bookshop in Penticton. Can you talk a little bit about that process and just what was that like for you to do that?
Well, initially we'd started off and we'd filmed in a bunch of different venues around Penticton that were all just kind of sitting there empty, and I wanted to show that. The problem we had with, and I tip my hat off to Chris Stenberg, he was the videographer for this particular show. We filmed it a number of different ways, and I struggled a lot with, just sort of staring down the barrel of a camera, which is a lot different than staring out into an audience and, that sort of live interaction. It felt very cold and very mechanical. And I guess like what we settled on was I wanted to portray this sort of two-dimensional world that we're all living in. So what you're going to see is it's a lot of profile. And it happened to be like in the bookshop was just the most fluid performance of the work itself. But that, there were a lot of moments in filming where I'd go back and just be like, God, should I add this part in or should I take this part out? And one of the things is people they're not going to see about 2 hours of the show. They're not going to see about 2 hours worth of extra things that when I first wrote the show, reading it back for the first time, I just thought, I can't read this. This is a suicide letter. This is crazy. It's so dark and so depressing, because a lot of it is journaling, and there's poetry sprinkled in throughout it, but that's kind of the place that I was in while I was going through what everybody else was going through. And I had to constantly remind myself that it's not just me. But there were days where I just woke up and thought, what is the point? What is the point of waking up tomorrow? It's just going to be the same as today. It's just going to be more of this over and over again. And I was kind of falling into this. Well, not kind of falling in. I fell into a very heavy depression. And when you're in that, you can't be creative when you're depressed. It's like trying to be productive when you have insomnia. You just,
And so what did you, like, how did you, you had this show that you were going to be doing for the Chan and all of this material, like what was the thing that kind of got you out of that? Even if just for a moment, maybe
part of it was a deadline, and the other part of it was just sort of, convincing myself not to shy away from talking about it all. And not just talking about the pandemic, but talking about a lot of the problems that we're facing right now, from homelessness to the environment, and all these sort of forces that are descending upon us while we're, sort of stranded in our homes and feeling ineffective and not really being able to do anything. We were all kind of in the hospital bed being told, bed rest, but you want to get up, and there's things to do, there's things you have to do. So it was a very, very disorienting time. And I guess like the workshop definitely helped pull me out of it a little bit. I got a creative spark from that, just sharing everybody else's energy. And so that was a boon for sure. But yeah, a large part of me is still depressed. I'm still here. I'm still alone. And it's been that way for a year.
Yeah, it's been a year. It's been a year.
It's been, I remember it was this time last year, I was in Seattle and, basically got the call, it's come home, it's done. We had 2 years of runway set up for, shows, continue to tour, life goes on. And like, you want to be an artist, you want to get out there and sort of support yourself, and then it's all gone. And I think that's where a lot of people found themselves.
It's been a devastating time for those of us in the arts, those of us in performance in so many ways.
My heart goes out to every not just artist, but every other person who is out there sort of going, athletes, tons of other people who are sort of experiencing that same thing. The life that they had is just cut off from them.
Yeah.
It just felt like a year of heavy loss on a lot of fronts, because the year previous was losing someone really huge in my life. Losing my grandmother was a very hard thing to get through. And I'm not all the way there with that yet, but then that bleeding into, when I lost my grandmother, I felt alone. When this happened, I really started to learn what alone feels like. Are we cut off? I don't know.
No, I think, I don't know. We need silence sometimes. I mean,
I agree. Yeah. Silence is good, but
yeah,
it's been a year of silence. So I don't know. Make noise. One of my favorite Vancouver poets, R.C. Waslewski, came up with this great thing: rather than having a moment of silence, have a moment of noise. I always love that.
It is great. So I was going to suggest that we turn our mics off and scream into the void. I'm going to come back with a question from Kat.
Okay.
Kat says, this past year has been one of such extremes in our politics, in our economic divides, and in the way we treat others or regard their opinions. How do you manage, as you always do, to find nuance when every single thing seems to shriek out like a tabloid front page headline? Have we lost nuance and reflection?
Yeah, okay. I think I talk about this somewhat in the show, or actually there's a large part that's kind of missing where I talk about us living our lives now online. And I think that's kind of chewed through our empathy a little bit, the sort of cord that connects us, because, we're behind the safety of the keyboard. We're not really real to each other anymore. So we can say things that cross lines. We've seen it politically now, where we're so divided now. The truth is a casualty in a lot of what we've been facing, where now we're getting noise and opinions, and the people that we trusted to give us the news, like journalists and the leaders that we elect and things like that. It was all kind of like watching it disintegrate online. not just next door, but here in Canada as well. And then you look at the larger world as a whole, and it's just kind of heartbreaking to see it all go that way. But I guess nobody likes change. I just kind of hope that it's not a permanent thing. I hope that, we get back to a place where we can look each other in the eyes again. We've been a year now, we can't even see each other smile, unless it's online, and I think there's a sort of Coliseum mentality that happens when you're behind the safety of the internet, or in the safety of a crowd. You can cheer for the guy getting eaten by the lion because everybody else is cheering, and so with the internet, it's just like one giant Coliseum. And, there's so many voices out there just adding to all of it. It's ironic that this thing that was, initially promoted as a way to unite everyone has become a tool to sort of divide us. And the way data gets aimed at us now, our data is harvested and then weaponized against us. If I talk about a cheese grater right now, I'm sure the next thing on my Facebook feed is going to be an advertisement for a cheese grater, or whatever it is. But that's kind of the way it's going, and that's happening with our politics now too. And it feels like something can just here's the truth, and somebody can just stand up and say, no, it's not, and that's enough to just sort of cause chaos, and we're all kind of lost in it right now.
And so what do you do? What do you do?
Cry. I try to bury my head and plow through the work. But it's not something I want to talk about. It's not what I want to write about. I don't want to write about these sort of hopeless feelings. So a lot of what I've been writing, the past year has been these sort of fictional things, like short stories and, little screenplays and things like that, just to bring some kind of levity to my own life and sort of like step back from that sort of those personal feelings about it. Because what can you do when you're angry and in an echo chamber? What can you, all you're doing is giving that energy to a room where it's coming back in at you. It's like you're shaking the bottle that all your feelings have kind of been, welled up in, and then it starts to spray everywhere. And I'm not sure how helpful that is, because then all you have left is this mess to clean up. I don't have a perfect answer for this is what you need to do to get yourself through this, because I'm barely here.
The work you create helps us think through these things. They articulate things that we are deeply feeling. I mean, I know that for myself in your work, 100%, absolutely. I think sometimes we create for the world that we want to be in, that we want to see. We have to conduct ourselves in the way in which we want to be treated. We create that, or we try to, or I hope that we do.
I agree with you. I just think this year it's been challenging to create that. For and sure. So a lot of what you'll see in the show is just, I don't know. I feel like I almost need to offer a trigger warning. It's not your typical Shane show. There's just a lot of heaviness in the air right now. But again, it was something that's like, I don't want to shy away from this. I don't want to shy away talking about this, because a lot of people are going through it, thinking it, feeling it, experiencing it, living it.
Yeah. I asked some of the folks behind the scenes how many people would be joining this evening. And there's something like 1,000 people that are going to be watching this at the same time.
1,000 people.
Yeah. And it just kind of boggles my mind, this thing where we're alone, and yet we're using this technology to do something together.
Alone together, right?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. You used to travel a lot. I used to travel a lot.
Yeah.
What do you think about that in the future? Do you have places that you want to go?
Of course, I have friends all over the place that I want to see again, that I want to sit down and have a laugh with and share a story with and catch up with. There's so many people that I miss right now, and it's being held back by this sort of dam that's got all these cracks in it. And I don't know what the world is going to look like when we come back to it. I don't know what, live shows are going to look like when we come back to them, if we come back to them. It may just be that we're so used to living our lives online now that we submit to, this is what it should be from now on. Or maybe, there's more fear. Maybe everybody's, traumatized so much by this event that they're going to be wondering, they're going to be paranoid about what's next.
I think we're going to have to figure out how do we be together again? How do we be in spaces together?
How do we heal from it too? I think the arts are going to be leaned on pretty heavily in terms of our mental health recovery from all of this. But we'll wait to see what kind of support there is for that. But yeah, you can feel it inside of people that they want to go see their friends again. They want to go out and experience things. They want to, I don't know. There's so much missing right now that people want to get back to. So, but yeah, how do we do that? How do we feel safe around each other? Once again, when all you see is like, every day you're scrolling through and it's another person who refuses to wear a mask in a grocery store and a fight ensues. And, there's all of these differences of opinion. What's going to happen when we take off all those masks and get to look each other in the eyes again? Is that hate or intolerance or that ignorance still going to be there? Are we still going to have to contend with it? Or are we going to be able to say, hey, I'm human, you're human. Why are we making our lives more difficult with these things, that seem fairly simple? It seems simple to put on a mask, but for some people it's like, no, you're infringing on my rights, you're impinging, my freedom, all of those things. People maybe are so hungry to get back to the world, they just want it to be over.
What is this world going to be like when we get back?
I don't know. I feel like I'm being very depressing right now. I'm so sorry, everybody.
It's real. It's real. It's real. But I do have a question from Judith that might bring us a little bit of maybe some levity. I don't know. Let's try.
I'll try. Let me see how I can twist this into something depressing.
Let's see. Judith says, Shane, I love your work. Just wondering if you could be a soup, what kind of soup would you be and why?
Oh God, it's an interesting question. I was going to say putrid soup just because I wanted to be, I thought of Kids in the Hall and you got to try the putrid soup. Oh, is it good? No, it's putrid. But no, I maybe tomato soup just because it pairs so well with grilled cheese and I love cheese. Something that's lovely on an autumn day, something like that. I'd need to think about it more.
Is it a comfort thing?
Now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, God, corn chowder, cream of mushroom. God, there's so many soups.
A question from Alice. If you have one, who is your own favorite poet or favorite poem?
Oh, there's a long list. There's a long list of people. You'll see one of them in the show. They make a cameo appearance. Managed to track them down and rope them into this. So I'll leave it for a surprise. But there's a long list. I think that's one of the things, people ask me all the time. It's like, how do you find your voice? My voice is made up of all the other voices that I've loved. All the other poets that I've read, the music that I've listened to, there's all that kind of influence there. And you pick the things that you kind of like and that becomes your voice. It's kind of it's kind of a melange of all these different influences.
What's happening? What's an influence for you right now in this moment, like lately?
I've been revisiting Al Purdy's work. Rooms for Rent in the Outer Planets is, it's an amazing book. There's a great poem in there about one of the last turtles left alive, Adam with no Eve. It's a beautiful poem, but again, like another one of those sort of, it's kind of like it squeezes your heart a little bit in terms of how sad it is. But those kinds of things I've been revisiting. Tony Hoagland, Tess Gallagher, Nancy Holmes, one of my old writing profs. The list is, obviously long, but there's so many great voices out there. And that's one of the things I always told people. It's like in Vancouver, it's like, if you want to do this, like, go to an open mic, go to the poetry slam, go to the Laugh Gallery on Commercial Drive. There's all kinds of outlets, but right now, obviously there isn't, so, yeah, I don't know.
Has there been online anything insofar as spoken word or poetry?
Oh, I'm sure there have. Yeah. Like, I mean, there's been concerts and things like that. I've checked out a few myself, other workshops. You try to keep engaged. You try to, keep your mind off of what you're going through. So that's kind of how it works. There's a lot of great writers out there for people if you just want to find them, whether that's Buddy Wakefield, another great one. Even, Vancouver local, I mentioned R.C. Wazlowski, fantastic writer. Yeah, you just got to look for them. And it becomes a bit of a rabbit hole too, in terms of, oh, I found this person, and then you go off their recommendations and it opens up this whole new world. But what I've been looking for is something that's going to make me laugh. I've had such a hard time trying to find my laugh. And so I don't know, if you have suggestions on books to make you laugh out loud, I would love it.
Off the top of my head, oh my gosh.
It's hard to think.
I have to say, like, it's not so much the laughter thing. I think for me, the thing that's been saving me is doing things that get me in my body, because this is not, being tethered by this to the screen. But a good living room dance session has always been helpful.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dancing alone. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. A question from Sarah, which I think we'll end with, and takes a bit to the beginning. When you were first starting out, how did you find the courage to put you and your work out there?
I think it was part of it was that test. Like when I first moved to Vancouver, I didn't really know what I was doing for. I didn't know what I was looking for. I'd gotten advice from both of my writing profs. They'd said, if you want to be a writer, just write, you're kind of spinning your wheels here. And so I moved to Vancouver, and sure enough, if you look for a community, you find it, and first it was sort of little coffee shops with, open mic readings and things like that. And then eventually saw a poster for the Vancouver Poetry Slam, which was happening at the Vancouver Press Club at the time. And from there, it just kind of opened up. And yeah, scary to step on a stage anytime, because you're kind of like, you're opening a vein for people, you're sharing something with them. So sometimes I've seen people disembowel themselves on stage. It can get pretty rough in terms of what people want to put out there. So it takes a certain level of, I want to do this. I think for me, I'd gotten to a point in my life where I'd been beaten down so much in terms of, we don't care what you think, we don't care what you say. And then by the time I got to university and was in, the sort of creative writing program, and part of that process is to give feedback and things like that, I realized, oh, people actually care what I think and care what I say. And it gave me that little bit of confidence I needed to, like, okay, well, I'm gonna go up and read a poem now to a bunch of people. And that's kind of where it started for me. And then it started to snowball. So I think, you lose your virginity on stage, the first time but it's either you love it or you hate it, or no matter what, it gives you something, and it'll tell you something about yourself. If and when it comes back, I encourage anybody to go out there and give it a try. You'd be surprised how much support there is, in Vancouver, even all over the place.
It's a pretty amazing community, I would say.
Yeah.
It's the kind of collegial competition. It's a competition, but it's not.
There's camaraderie there. There's
exactly.
there's and there's a sense of like sort of finding your family in a way, where it's like it's okay because I get my 3 minutes and you get your 3 minutes. We all have that sort of But the question is, am I brave enough to go up there and open that vein for everybody? Or is it okay to let them see me bleed a little bit?
Thank you so much, Shane. I think
you're so welcome. Thank you,
such a good
everybody
conversation.
at home.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I'm not more jovial, but I'm still kind of in this. But thank you so much. Thank you to the Chan Center for giving me the opportunity to do this. Thank you to all of this sort of special cameo people you'll see along the way during this show. Just really appreciate it, and really appreciate them giving me space to say some things about this.
We're all looking forward to it. Shane, take care.
You too. Thank you so much, Joyce.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
Have an enchanting weekend, everyone.